The throne
Your
room of the
presence here is an
Valtharian Empire
intrusion.
stretched
I
vast and
seek
cold
only
beneath
passage.
crystalline
Then
vaults
prove your
that had
worth.
witnessed 3 centuries of Queen Zarvana Kalseth's reign. She stood 8 feet tall before her council copper hair, blazing like molten metal, frozen mid-pore, and felt smaller than she'd ever been in 300 years. Morning light filtered through ice-sculpted windows, casting fractured rainbows across polished obsidian floors, where a dozen council members stood in rigid formation. Their orange skin gleamed in the ethereal glow, but their faces held no warmth. Only expectation, only judgment. Golden eyes swept across the faces of those who served her, seeing past their practiced neutrality to the impatience beneath. The formal regalia of her station weighed heavy today, though she had worn it 1,000 times before. War Marshal Kidros stepped forward from the line. His massive frame, even by Valtharian standards, spoke of brutal efficiency honed across 100 campaigns. Scars decorated his face like medals, and his voice carried the weight of military authority when he spoke. Your Majesty, the Council awaits your decision. Zarvana's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the armrest of her throne. 300 years old. By Valtharian law, a queen must produce an heir before reaching that age or surrender the crown. She had 3 years remaining. 3 years that felt like 3 seconds. The law is clear, Kidros continued, moving closer with predatory confidence. I have offered you an alliance of strength. My bloodline is pure, my victories are legendary. Together we would forge an empire that spans galaxies. The words were rehearsed. She had heard variations of this speech for months now, ever since the council began whispering about her biological clock. The great Queen Zarvana, conqueror of 6 systems, unable to produce a single heir. The law is indeed clear, War Marshal. Her voice carried the frost of 1,000 winter storms. It says I must produce an heir. It does not say I must marry you to do so. A ripple of tension moved through the assembled council. Princess Elixra, her younger sister, allowed the ghost of a smile to touch her lips from her position near the window. Kidros's jaw tightened. Your Majesty has tried for 2 decades. 20 years of failure. The finest males of our species have been offered, and yet, choose your next words carefully, War Marshal. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Zarvana rose from her throne, her full height making even Kydros step back half a pace. She descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing like a war drum in the cavernous space. You speak of failure as if it were mine alone. Tell me, when a seed refuses to take root in fertile soil, do we blame the soil or do we question the seed? Kidros's face flushed a deeper orange. The medical examinations were clear. Your Majesty's biology is sound. The failure lies not in. The medical examinations told us what we already know. My genetics are incompatible with every Valtharian male tested, including you. She stopped directly before him, meeting his eyes without flinching. Perhaps that is not failure. Perhaps that is evolution's way of saying no. The council erupted into murmurs. This was new territory. Queens did not question their own biology. Queens did not suggest that perhaps the problem lay in the species itself. An elderly counselor stepped forward, his voice creaking with age and authority. Your Majesty, such talk borders on heresy. Our genetic purity has sustained us for 10,000 years. I suggest nothing, Counselor Rethek. I merely observe what the medical data tells us. 20 years, dozens of attempts, 0 success. She turned, addressing the full council now. At what point do we acknowledge that perhaps the universe is trying to tell us something? Elixra moved from her position by the window, her younger face showing concern mixed with admiration. Sister, the people grow restless. They see your lack of an heir as a sign of weakness. The outer colonies whisper about succession. If I do not, what marry a man I do not trust, bear a child through force of political will. Zarvana's eyes softened, looking at her sister. You know as well as I do that Kydros seeks the throne, not a family. Power shared is power doubled, Your Majesty. Kydros's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. You have 3 years remaining. After that, the crown passes to the next in line. Do you truly wish to be remembered as the queen who could not secure her own legacy? The words struck deeper than Zarvana would ever admit. She had built this empire from the ashes of civil war. She had brought prosperity to a dozen worlds. She had forged alliances and crushed rebellions with equal measure of wisdom and strength. And yet history would remember her as the barren queen who lost everything because her body refused to cooperate. This council is dismissed. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. I will consider your counsel, but know this: I am still queen. and I will not be bullied into decisions that affect the rest of my life. Kidros bowed, but his eyes held no deference. As you command, your majesty. But time, as they say, waits for no one, not even queens. The council filed out in silence. Only Elixra remained waiting until the massive doors sealed shut before approaching her sister. You know he's not wrong about time. Zarvana moved to the window, gazing out over the crystalline spires of the capital city. Below, thousands of her subjects moved through their daily lives, unaware of the drama unfolding in the towers above them, unaware that their queen stood on the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss of her own inadequacy. I want a child, Elixra. The admission came soft, almost vulnerable. Not for the throne, not for politics. I want to hold something I created and know that some part of me will continue after I'm gone. Is that so terrible? Elixra placed a hand on her sister's armored shoulder. It's the most natural thing in any world, but wanting and having are different battles, and this one. The words died as an alarm shrieked through the palace. Both women turned toward the sound warrior instincts, overriding sentiment in an instant. A guard burst through the doors, his face flushed with exertion. Your Majesty, an unidentified vessel has entered our atmosphere, its damage descending rapidly toward the northern ice fields. Zarvana's tactical mind immediately began calculating trajectories and threats. Origin. Scanners indicate human construction, but the signature is unfamiliar. It appears to be a solo reconnaissance craft. One vessel, one pilot likely. She moved toward the exit, Elixra falling in step beside her. Alert the recovery teams. If they survive the crash, I want them brought to me immediately. Sister, perhaps you should let the military handle. A human pilot crashes on my world during a council session where I'm being pressured to marry for political gain. Zarvana's laugh held no humor. The universe has a sense of timing. I want to meet this pilot myself. The royal transport cut through icy winds toward the crash site, Zarvana standing at the viewport watching the frozen landscape blur past. The northern territories were inhospitable, even to Valtharians, a wasteland of endless, white broken only by jagged mountains and deep crevasses. A human would last perhaps an hour exposed to these elements, less if injured. The crashed vessel came into view, a twisted sculpture of metal and composite materials half buried in a snowdrift. Smoke still rose from its broken hull, black against white. The recovery team had already secured a perimeter when the royal transport touched down. Zarvana emerged into the biting cold, feeling it bite through even her reinforced armor. Her breath crystallized in the air as she approached the wreckage. Guards moved ahead of her, weapons ready, but she waved them back. If the pilot survived this, they deserved the courtesy of not being greeted by an execution squad. She found him 20 meters from the main crash site, crawling through snow that came up to his chest. The environmental suit he wore was top-tier human technology, but already frost was forming on its seals. He sensed her presence and rolled onto his back, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Through his helmet's faceplate, she saw brown eyes that held no fear, only calculation. Well, the human's voice crackled through his suit's speakers. This is either a rescue or an execution, and I'm too tired to care which. Zarvana knelt beside him, her height making it easy to examine him without bending far. Mid-40s, if she read human aging correctly. Strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. Laugh lines around the eyes despite the current circumstances. A survivor's face. Your vessel violated Valtharian airspace. Crashed in restricted territory. By law, you are either a spy or an idiot. Can I be both? The human actually smiled. Captain Theron Vex, freelance scout currently having the worst day of his career. And you must be the welcoming committee. One of her guards stepped forward. You address Queen Zarvana Kal-Seth, ruler of the Valtharian Empire. Show proper respect, or Zarvana raised a hand, silencing the guard. Something about this human's audacity intrigued her. Most species cowered before her. This one made jokes. You're either very brave or very foolish, Captain Vex. I prefer charmingly confident, but I'll take what I can get. He tried to sit up, winced, and settled back into the snow. My ship's navigation systems went haywire. One minute I'm mapping an asteroid field, the next I'm playing lawn dart with your planet. No offense intended to your sovereignty or your very impressive stature. Despite herself, Zarvana felt the corner of her mouth twitch. When was the last time someone had made her want to smile? Years, certainly. She stood gesturing to her guards. Bring him to the medical facility. If he's a spy, he's the most incompetent one I've ever encountered. If he's simply unlucky, then mercy costs us nothing. As they loaded the human onto a transport stretcher, he called out to her, Your Majesty, Thanks for not shooting first and asking questions never. That's very progressive of you. Don't make me regret it, Captain. The medical facility within the palace complex was a cathedral of advanced technology, all gleaming instruments and holographic displays. Zarvana watched through an observation window as doctors examined the human pilot. Elixra joined her tablet in hand. Preliminary scans show no weapons, no surveillance equipment beyond standard navigational tools. His story appears legitimate. Appears. You don't trust him. Zarvana watched as Terran charmed the medical staff despite being examined like a laboratory specimen. He made one of the nurses laugh, a remarkable feat considering the situation. I don't trust coincidence. And this timing is too convenient. You think Kydros arranged this somehow? I think my war marshal is ambitious enough to stage a distraction. A human crashes on our world the same morning he demands I marry him. It reeks of manipulation. Elixra pulled up data on her tablet. I've reviewed Captain Vex's background. He's legitimate former military pilot turned freelance scout. Decorated service record with the Terran Expeditionary Forces. Widowed 10 years ago, no children. Been flying solo missions ever since. If this is a plant, they chose someone with a very convincing paper trail. The word widowed caught Zarvana's attention. A man running from grief. She understood that impulse all too soon. How many battles had she fought to avoid facing her own fears? The chief medical officer emerged from the examination room, his expression professionally neutral. Your Majesty, the human is stable. Minor fractures, some contusions, but nothing life-threatening. His environmental suit saved him from the worst of the exposure. And his vessel, can it be repaired? The engineering team is examining it now, but initial reports are not optimistic. The damage is extensive, which meant the human would be her guest for some time. Zarvana made a decision that would later seem either prophetic or catastrophically foolish. Transfer him to the Northern Hunting Lodge. It's secure, comfortable, and isolated. Until we determine whether his crash was accidental or engineered, he remains under house arrest. Elixra's eyes widened. Sister, that's your private retreat. Surely there are more appropriate prisons, yes, but I want to question him myself away from the Council's prying eyes and Kydros' scheming. If this human is a pawn, I'll know it. If he's genuinely unlucky, then we treat him with the hospitality our laws require. And if the Council objects to you spending time alone with an alien male, Zarvana's smile turned sharp, then they can explain why our queen is not trusted to interrogate a potential threat herself. I am many things, sister, but I am not so fragile that one human male poses a danger. The words would prove ironic within days. The Northern Hunting Lodge was carved into a mountainside, all dark stone and soaring ceilings. It had been 3 generations since the Valtharian queen had used it for its original purpose. These days, it served as Zarvana's refuge from court politics. Here she could simply be herself. No crown, no ceremony, no expectations she could never meet. Terran stood in the main hall, fully healed and visibly impressed. This is house arrest. My apartment back on Earth would fit in your entrance hall. Twice, weediness. Don't get comfortable. You're not a guest, Captain. You're a variable I'm trying to solve. He turned to face her, and she noticed he had to tilt his head back significantly to meet her eyes. Most humans would find her height intimidating. Terran simply adjusted his perspective. A variable, that's a new one. Usually I'm classified as rogue element or pain in the ass. Variable suggests I might actually have value. That remains to be seen. She moved past him toward the lodge's command center, a smaller version of her palace facilities. Your ship's black box was recovered. The data shows a cascade failure in your navigation systems. Very convenient. Convenient for whom I'm the one who nearly became a frozen corpse on your ice ball of a planet. No offense to your meteorology. Zarvana pulled up the flight data, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. The failure pattern is unusual, almost as if something external triggered it. Terran moved closer to examine the display, close enough that she caught his scent different from Valtharian males, sharper, somehow tinged with something her biology registered as interesting. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the data. That spike there, his finger pointed to an anomaly in the readings. I saw that right before everything went to hell. It wasn't system failure. Something hit me with an electromagnetic pulse. An attack. A targeted one. Someone wanted me here. Question is, why aim for your planet specifically? It was the question Zarvana had been asking herself. She pulled up territorial maps overlaying known hostile factions and recent military movements. Nothing suggested an obvious motive for dragging a human pilot into Valtharian space. Your political situation. Theron spoke carefully as if testing the waters. Is it possible someone wants to create an incident? Humans have been trying to establish diplomatic relations with your empire for years. A crashed ship, a dead pilot that could be used to justify all kinds of responses. He wasn't stupid. That complicated things. You've done your homework on Valtharian politics. I'm a scout. Information is my business. And word travels even to the outer systems. The great Queen Zarvana, 3 centuries of reign facing succession, questions because... He trailed off, realizing he'd ventured into dangerous territory. Because I can't produce an heir. Yes, Captain. That particular failure is apparently known even to human scouts in the frontier. She closed the holographic displays with more force than necessary. Is there any aspect of my inadequacy that hasn't become galactic gossip? Silence fell between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Zarvana rarely showed such vulnerability, and certainly not to strangers. The words had escaped before she could cage them, revealing a wound she usually kept hidden beneath layers of imperial authority. Theron's voice when he spoke held no mockery. For what it's worth, Your Majesty, from where I stand, you've built something remarkable. This empire, your people's prosperity, that's a legacy most rulers would kill for. The genetic lottery is just that, a lottery. It doesn't define your worth. She turned to face him, searching his expression for signs of manipulation or false flattery. Found none, just a middle-aged man who'd seen enough of life to know that success came in many forms. You lost your wife. It wasn't a question. She'd read his file. 10 years ago, cancer. We'd been trying for kids, but the treatments. He shrugged the gesture, carrying a decade of grief compressed into one movement. So I understand a little bit about wanting something biology won't give you. Doesn't make it hurt less, but it puts it in perspective. Before Zarvana could respond, alarms shrieked through the lodge's systems. She pulled up the environmental monitors, her warrior instincts taking over. The data made her curse in 3 languages. What's wrong? Blizzard, Category 5. It's moving faster than the weather services predicted. She ran calculations, lips pressed into a thin line. We're cut off. No transport can fly in these conditions, and the ground route will be buried within the hour. So we're stuck here. For at least 3 days, possibly longer. She activated emergency protocols, sealing the lodge's thermal shields. The structure is self-sufficient. We won't freeze or starve, but we also won't be leaving until this storm passes. Theron moved to the window, watching as the sky darkened to an ominous gray-black. Wind already howled against the reinforced glass, carrying ice crystals that glittered like diamonds before smashing against the panes. Could be worse, he said finally. Could be stuck in a crashed ship instead of a palace carved into a mountain. This isn't a palace, it's a prison. For both of us. Then we make the best of it. He turned from the window, offering a smile that seemed genuine despite the circumstances. I'm told I'm decent company when I'm not bleeding into snow. Got any Valtharian chess or the equivalent? 3 days is a long time to spend in uncomfortable silence. Despite everything, the Council's pressure, Kidros' schemes, her own biological clock ticking down, Zarvana found herself almost looking forward to the challenge. This human was unlike anyone she'd dealt with in centuries. No fear, no false reverence, just honest interaction stripped of political calculation. We have something called tactical conquest. It's a strategy game, very old. Perfect. I'll try not to embarrass myself too badly against a 300-year-old strategic genius. 297. Sorry, I'm 297. I have 3 years before the ancient law forces me to abdicate if I haven't produced an heir. The admission surprised her even as she spoke it. Why was she telling this human such personal details? Theron's expression softened with understanding. 3 years is still 3 years. A lot can happen in that time. Trust me, I've seen stranger things than... He paused, seeming to catch himself before saying something potentially offensive. Then a barren alien queen finding sudden fertility. Zarvana's tone held bitter edges. I've had 20 years of medical intervention, Captain Vex. The finest geneticists in 6 systems have examined me. The verdict is unanimous. My biology is incompatible with Valtharian males. Some flaw in my genetic code that rejects every attempt at conception. The storm outside intensified, rattling the windows. Zarvana moved to the environmental controls, double-checking the thermal systems. Theron watched her work, saying nothing for a long moment. Can I say something that might be completely out of line? She glanced at him. You've been doing that since we met. Why stop now? Maybe nature's not telling you no. Maybe it's telling you not this way. You said incompatible with Valtharian males. That's pretty specific. What about the rest of the galaxy? The suggestion hung in the air between them. Zarvana's hands stilled on the controls. The Council would call that heresy. Our genetic purity has been maintained for 10,000 years. To even suggest breeding outside our species would make you a revolutionary instead of a failure. Theron shrugged. Just a thought. From someone who's seen a lot of species try to preserve some imagined purity, only to discover that hybrid vigor beats pure bloodlines almost every time. Before she could formulate a response, the lights flickered. Power systems automatically rerouted to emergency backups, bathing the lodge in softer amber lighting. The temperature dropped several degrees almost immediately. That's not good. Zarvana pulled up system diagnostics. The primary heating array just failed. Backup systems will maintain life support, but barely. We'll need to move to the central chamber. It's the most thermally efficient space in the lodge. They gathered supplies quickly: thermal blankets, emergency rations, portable heaters. The central chamber was smaller than the main hall, circular, and carved from a single piece of volcanic glass. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, already roaring with flames thanks to automated systems. Still, Zarvana could feel the cold creeping in around the edges. How cold are we talking? Theron asked, arranging blankets near the fire. Outside, -70 by morning. In here, cold enough that even I'll feel it, and Valtharians are adapted to ice worlds. She saw the concern flicker across his face. Your environmental suit will protect you, but the power cells won't last 3 days at maximum output. So we conserve. Ration the heat. He was already doing the calculations she could see in his eyes. Share body heat when necessary. Survival 101. The pragmatism of it should have made the suggestion purely tactical, but something in the way he said it, coupled with the intimate space and the isolation of the storm, made Zarvana's pulse quicken slightly. She told herself it was just the cold affecting her metabolism. Hours passed. They played tactical conquest, and Theron proved surprisingly adept despite his unfamiliarity with the rules. They talked about his military career, her early reign, the differences between human and Valtharian culture. He made her laugh with stories of his more ridiculous scouting assignments. She surprised herself by sharing memories of her sister's childhood, of the weight of the crown when she first wore it at age 47. As the second night of the storm approached, the temperature continued to drop despite the fire. Zarvana's tolerance for cold was significantly higher than a human's, but even she felt the bite of it. Theron's suit had been running on minimal power for hours, and she could see the strain in his posture. Your suit is failing. It wasn't a question. I can last through the night. Tomorrow we'll figure something out. You'll be hypothermic by midnight. Don't be stubborn. She pulled several thermal blankets together near the fire, creating an insulated nest. We share body heat. It's the logical solution. Your Majesty, I don't think... Captain Vex, I have seen you crash land on my planet, charm my medical staff, lose at tactical conquest with grace, and maintain your humor while trapped in a blizzard. At this point, proximity for survival is hardly scandalous. Besides, she added with a slight smile, who's going to tell the Council? He surrendered his suit to standby mode and joined her in the blanket nest, keeping a respectful distance. But physics and cold temperatures cared nothing for propriety. Gradually, they moved closer until her larger frame curved around his smaller one, sharing the heat that her Valtharian metabolism generated more efficiently. This is surreal, Theron murmured in the darkness. 2 days ago, I was mapping asteroids. Now I'm here with an 8-foot alien queen while a death blizzard rages outside. She felt his laugh through his back. Right, very tactical. So tactical that I can feel your heart beating. The observation should have made her pull away. Instead, Zarvana found herself acutely aware of every point of contact between them. His warmth different from Valtharian males, less intense, but somehow more vital. His scent, which her biology kept registering as compatible in ways that made no logical sense. Tell me about your wife. The question surprised her as much as it likely surprised him. Theron was quiet for a moment. Sarah, she was a xenobotanist. We met on a joint terraforming project. She could make anything grow even in the harshest conditions. Used to say that life always finds a way if you give it half a chance. His voice softened with memory. She would have liked you, actually. Sarah had a thing for powerful women who didn't take anyone's nonsense. I'm sorry you lost her. Me too, but I learned something watching her work. She taught me that sometimes the most beautiful things happen when you combine elements that shouldn't work together. Hybrid plants that thrived where pure strains failed. Ecosystems that became stronger through diversity rather than purity. Zarvana's breath caught. Was he suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? Captain, if you're implying. I'm not implying anything, just sharing what my wife taught me about life. He shifted slightly, and somehow they were closer still. But if I were implying something, it would be that maybe the universe crashed me on your planet for a reason. Maybe coincidences aren't always random. That's a dangerous thought. Most worthwhile thoughts are. The fire crackled, wind howled outside, and in the warm cocoon of blankets, Zarvana felt something shift inside her chest. A possibility she'd never allowed herself to consider. Not because it was impossible, but because admitting the possibility meant admitting how desperate she'd become. When we were bringing you to medical, she said quietly, one of my guards made a joke. Suggested that perhaps we should test breeding with other species since Valtharian males had failed so spectacularly. What did you do? I laughed at him. The memory crystallized sharp and clear. The very idea, breeding with a human. Your lifespans are brief flickers compared to ours. Your genetics, fragile. Your biology completely alien. The scandal alone would destroy everything I've built. But I'm trapped in a hunting lodge with said human sharing warmth while a storm tries to kill us both, and I find myself wondering. She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. Theron turned in her arms facing her now. In the firelight, his eyes held something she hadn't seen from any male in longer than she could remember. Not political calculation, not genetic assessment, just honest attraction mixed with understanding. Wondering if maybe the universe is laughing at you for laughing at it. Something like that. For what it's worth, Your Majesty, I think the universe has a terrible sense of humor. But sometimes the worst jokes turn out to be the best punchlines. They stayed like that, facing each other close enough to feel each other breathe. Zarvana was acutely aware that she was the queen of a vast empire, that Theron was a human pilot whose culture and biology were completely alien to her own, that they'd known each other for barely 2 days, that a dozen political and practical reasons existed why this moment should not be happening. She kissed him anyway. It started as curiosity, a test of the hypothesis that had been building since he'd made her laugh in the medical bay. But curiosity ignited into something far more consuming. His warmth, his taste, the way his hands found her face despite the awkward angle created by their height difference. Everything about it should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing she'd experienced in decades. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder than the cold justified Theron's expression mixed wonder with concern. Your Majesty, Zarvana, in this moment, just Zarvana. Zarvana. He tested the name, made it sound like something precious. I need you to know this isn't me trying to manipulate or take advantage. If we do this, if we cross this line, I need it to be real. Not politics, not desperation. Real. She cupped his face in her larger hand, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. You are the only thing in 300 years that has made me want to stop thinking like a queen and start feeling like a woman. Then stop thinking. They made love slowly, carefully, two beings from different worlds learning each other's languages through touch and breath and whispered discoveries. Zarvana had been with Valtharian males dozens of times over the centuries, always clinical, always evaluated, always measured for genetic viability. This was nothing like that. This was the rarest commodity in her long life, a choice made purely for desire rather than duty. Afterward, wrapped in blankets with the storm still raging outside, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Foolish, impossible hope that maybe the universe had decided to give her one last chance at the future she'd mourned for 20 years. We can't tell anyone about this, she said into the darkness. Agreed. Though I have to say I slept with the queen is a story that would really liven up boring dinner parties. She swatted him gently. I'm serious. The political ramifications. I know. His tone sobered. Your war marshal wants your throne. Your council wants genetic purity. Your people expect perfection. And I'm a human pilot who crashed at exactly the wrong time. Or exactly the right time. I'm still not sure which. What happens when the storm ends? We figure it out, together if you want. Or we call this a beautiful accident and go back to our separate lives. Your choice, Zarvana. Always your choice. She pulled him closer, feeling his heartbeat steady against her. I spent 20 years being told I was broken because my body wouldn't accept what it was supposed to accept. What if I'm not broken? What if I was just waiting for something different? Then maybe we both got lucky when my navigation systems failed. Morning brought clearer skies and a summons on the lodge's communication system. Elixir's face appeared on the holographic display, relief evident in her features. Sister, thank the stars. We've been trying to reach you for hours. The storm damaged several relay stations. Are you safe? Alive and well, the lodge's systems held. Zarvana was acutely aware of Theron in the next room, giving her privacy for the call. What's the situation in the capital? Kydros is demanding an emergency council session. He's claiming your isolation with the human pilot is inappropriate and potentially dangerous. He wants the prisoner transferred to military custody immediately. Of course he did. Zarvana felt the weight of reality crashing back down on the fragile hope she'd built over 3 storm-bound days. And the council's response? Split. About half agree with him. The other half think he's using this as an excuse to undermine your authority. Elixra leaned closer to her display, lowering her voice. Sister, what really happened up there? You look different. Zarvana caught her own reflection in a polished surface. Did she look different? She felt different, alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. We survived a blizzard, nothing more. Zarvana, her sister, used her given name reserved for private moments. I've known you for 200 years. I can tell when you're hiding something. What did you do? Before she could answer, Theron appeared in the doorway. Just his presence made her heart rate increase slightly, a biological response she couldn't quite control. Elixra's eyes widened. Oh no. Sister, please tell me you didn't. I need you to have the medical bay prepared for my return. Full bioscan, complete privacy, no staff records. Can you arrange that? Elixra stared at her for a long moment, understanding dawning across her features. You think it's possible? I don't know, but I need to know. Before Kydros and the council turn this into a political circus, I need to know if... She couldn't finish the sentence. The hope was too fragile, too new. I'll handle it. But Zarvana, if this is what I think it is, if you're actually pregnant, the council will lose their minds. Kydros will use it to destroy you. Then we make sure no one knows until we understand what we're dealing with. She ended the transmission and turned to Theron, who'd heard enough to understand the stakes. Medical scan, you think it's possible? He moved closer, taking her hands. We were together one night. That's not how biology usually works, even between compatible species. Valtharian conception is different from human. If conditions are right, if the genetic match is perfect, it can happen very quickly. But you're right, we're not supposed to be compatible. This shouldn't be possible. A lot of impossible things have happened in the last 4 days. The transport arrived within the hour, piloted by Elixra herself to ensure discretion. The flight back to the capital passed in tense silence, both Zarvana and Theron lost in private thoughts about what the scan might reveal. The medical bay was empty, as promised, privacy shields activated. Zarvana lay on the examination table while advanced scanners mapped every aspect of her biology. Theron stood by the wall, technically a prisoner again, but treated more like an anxious partner. Elixra monitored the readings, her expression growing more shocked with each passing second. This can't be right. Her sister's voice shook slightly. I'm running the scan again. Just tell me. Zarvana gripped the edge of the table. You're pregnant, 4 days along, which matches the timeline perfectly. But sister, this isn't just pregnancy. The genetic analysis. Elixra pulled up holographic displays showing DNA helixes that spiraled in patterns neither purely Valtharian nor human, but something magnificently new. Your body isn't rejecting the embryo, it's embracing it. Your genetics and his are merging perfectly, creating something stable and viable. It's as if your biology was designed to accept human DNA specifically. Theron moved closer, staring at the displays with an expression mixing awe and terror. That's our child. It's impossible, Zarvana whispered. 20 years of failed attempts with my own species, and one night with a human male succeeds. How? Elixra ran more tests, her fingers flying across controls. I'm seeing something remarkable. Human DNA has certain flexibility that Valtharian genetics lack. Our purity, our carefully maintained bloodlines, they've actually made us less adaptable. The human genetic code is filling in gaps in your own, like a key fitting a lock we didn't know existed. Hybrid vigor. Theron's voice was soft, like Sarah's plants. When you combine different genetic lines, sometimes you get something stronger than either parent species alone. This will destroy everything. Zarvana sat up, one hand unconsciously moving to her still flat abdomen. The council will never accept a hybrid heir. Kydros will use this as proof that I'm unfit to rule. The genetic purists will call for my execution. Or, Elixra said quietly, you could hide it. Claim medical intervention finally worked. Say you used genetic therapy to conceive with a Valtharian donor. No one needs to know about Captain Vex's involvement. The suggestion hung in the air. It would be so easy. Lie hide the truth, secure her throne and her heir with a simple deception. Zarvana looked at Theron, seeing the conflict in his eyes. He would go along with it if she asked. Disappear, let her claim the child as purely Valtharian, fade back into the anonymous frontier. No, the word surprised her even as she spoke it. I spent 300 years being who everyone expected me to be, building an empire on foundations of genetic purity and cultural superiority. And all it got me was 20 years of failure and a council full of vultures waiting for me to die without an heir. She stood facing her sister. Maybe it's time the Empire learned something new. You'll start a civil war, Elixir warned. Then I'll face it. Zarvana's hand found Theron's, their fingers intertwining. But first we keep this quiet, just until we understand what we're dealing with. This child is 4 days old. We have time to prepare, to plan, to build alliances before we reveal the truth. How long do we have? Theron asked. Elixir checked the developmental projections. Based on these readings, the pregnancy is accelerating. Your hybrid biology is affecting growth rates. I'd estimate 2 weeks until birth, maybe less. 2 weeks, Zarvana laughed, the sound carrying edges of hysteria and hope. I've waited 20 years for a child, and now I have 2 weeks to prepare for everything to change. Theron squeezed her hand. We prepare together. Whatever comes next, we face it together. She looked down at him, this impossible human who'd crashed into her life and changed everything in less than a week. The universe has a terrible sense of humor. And now I think we're all part of the punchline. Outside the medical bay, the capital city of the Valtharian Empire continued its daily rhythms, unaware that everything was about to change. In the council chambers, Kydros plotted his political moves. In the outer colonies, citizens whispered about their queen's mysterious isolation. And in the medical bay, 3 people stared at holographic images of an impossible child that would either unite 2 species or tear an empire apart. The storm had passed, but the real tempest was just beginning. Day 5 dawned over the Valtharian capital with deceptive calm. Zarvana stood at the observation deck of her private quarters, watching the twin suns paint the crystalline spires in shades of amber and gold. Below, the city stirred to life, merchants opening shops, transports gliding through aerial lanes. Citizens beginning another day in the empire she had built from ash and ambition 3 centuries ago. Everything looked the same. Everything had changed. Her hand rested on her abdomen, still flat, but carrying a secret that would reshape civilizations. 4 days since conception, but already she felt different. Stronger somehow, as if the hybrid genetics were enhancing, rather than compromising, her Valtharian physiology. You're up early, Theron's voice came from the doorway. He'd been given quarters near hers under the pretense of continued house arrests, close enough for discretion, but far enough to avoid immediate scandal. I don't sleep much anymore. Too much happening inside. She gestured to her midsection. The child is already affecting my metabolism. I can feel it growing. He moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Even here in private, they had to remember that walls had sensors, and loyal servants sometimes served multiple masters. How fast are we talking? Elixir ran projections overnight. At current acceleration rates, we have perhaps 10 days, maybe 12. She turned to face him fully. 10 days to prepare the Empire for a truth that will shatter everything they believe. Or we could still lie, hide, pretend this child is purely Valtharian. Zarvana shook her head. I've spent 300 years being the perfect queen, upholding traditions I didn't create, enforcing purity standards I never questioned, and it brought me nothing but 20 years of failure. This child, our child, is proof that something new is possible. Theron's hand found hers, hidden from view by the angle of their bodies to any surveillance. That's going to make you a lot of enemies. I know. Kydros will use this to justify everything he's been planning. The genetic purists will call for my head. Half the council will support them. Her fingers tightened on his. But the other half, the ones tired of stagnation, the ones who see that our vaunted purity has made us brittle rather than strong, they might just follow me. And if they don't, then I lose everything. Crown Empire, possibly my life. She met his eyes, seeing her own fear and determination reflected back. But I'll have this child. I'll have proven that impossible things are just things we haven't tried yet. That's worth the cut. Before he could respond, emergency chimes echoed through her quarters. Elixir's face materialized in holographic urgency, her expression grave. Sister, we have a situation. Kydros is calling an emergency council session. He claims to have evidence of impropriety during your isolation at the hunting lodge. Ice crystallized in Zarvana's veins. He knows. I don't see how. The medical scans were completely private, no records outside our immediate access, and Elixir's eyes widened with realization. The lodge. He must have had surveillance installed. Sister, if he recorded what happened, then the choice of revelation has been taken from me. Both Zarvana's mind shifted into tactical mode, centuries of strategic thinking, engaging like battle armor, locking into place. When is this session? 1 hour. He's demanding your presence, and that the human prisoner be brought before the full council for judgment. Zarvana looked at Theron, seeing the same calculation in his eyes. They'd wanted time to prepare to build alliances to control the narrative. Kidros had just stolen all 3 advantages. Tell the council I'll be there, and have security bring Captain Vex under formal escort. If we're doing this, we do it properly. The council chamber felt different today. The usual undercurrent of political maneuvering had sharpened into something closer to bloodlust. 50 council members occupied their designated positions in concentric circles around the central floor, where Zarvana stood, her full royal regalia, transforming her into a figure of imperial authority. Theron stood 20 paces away, flanked by guards, technically a prisoner, but standing with a dignity that made the designation seem absurd. Kydros occupied the war marshal's position, elevated above the regular council, but still below the queen's dais. His scarred face held triumph barely masked by procedural concern. Your Majesty, he began, voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Thank you for attending on such short notice. The matter before us is grave. It concerns the integrity of the crown itself. Speak plainly, War Marshal. What evidence do you claim to possess? Kydros activated a holographic display. Security footage from the hunting lodge appeared time-stamped and dated. Zarvana's stomach dropped as she recognized the central chamber, the thermal nest of blankets, 2 figures coming together in the firelight. The footage cut off before showing anything explicit, but the intent was clear. The council chamber erupted in gasps and angry murmurs. Your Majesty engaged in intimate relations with a human prisoner, Kydros announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. A violation of every protocol regarding alien contact, a betrayal of genetic purity, an act of what exactly? Zarvana's voice cracked like a whip, silencing the chamber. An act of survival. Captain Vex and I were trapped in a blizzard, forced to share heat to avoid freezing. The footage shows exactly what it claims to show: 2 beings keeping each other alive. The footage shows far more than survival instincts, Your Majesty. It shows that I am still capable of making my own choices. She descended from the dais, moving to stand in the center of the chamber, where all could see her clearly. Yes, War Marshal, I was intimate with the human pilot. Not under coercion, not through manipulation. By choice. The chamber exploded. Counselors shouted over each other, some in outrage, others in shock. Kydros raised his hands for silence, but his expression held satisfaction. He'd wanted her to admit it. Now came the trap. Your Majesty's admission is noted, however the matter becomes more complex. He pulled up medical data, not the private scans Elixir had run, but public health monitoring that every royal underwent automatically. Palace medical systems detected hormonal changes consistent with early pregnancy. Given the timeline and your admission of intimate contact with the prisoner, the conclusion is inescapable. Silence fell like a blade. 50 pairs of eyes fixed on Zarvana, seeing her not as their queen, but as a problem requiring solution. You carry a hybrid. Kydros spoke the words like a death sentence. An abomination born of genetic corruption. Your Majesty, I take no pleasure in this, but the law is clear. Genetic purity must be maintained. The pregnancy must be terminated, the human executed for contaminating the royal bloodline, and you must submit to genetic cleansing before... No. The single word stopped Kydros mid-sentence. Zarvana stood taller, her 8-foot frame dominating the center of the chamber, and when she spoke again, her voice carried 3 centuries of accumulated authority. I will not terminate this pregnancy. I will not execute an innocent man, and I will not submit to your barbaric rituals. She turned slowly, addressing the entire council. For 20 years I have endured every treatment, every procedure, every indignity that our medical science could devise. 20 years of failure because my genetics are incompatible with Valtharian males. Not because I am defective, because our precious genetic purity has made us so specialized that we can barely reproduce among ourselves. Your Majesty speaks heresy, an elderly counselor began. I speak truth, her voice thundered. One night with a human male achieved what 20 years with our finest genetic specimens could not. This child exists because human DNA is flexible enough, adaptable enough to bypass the genetic locks we've bred into ourselves. Kydros's expression hardened. Then your majesty leaves me no choice. As war marshal, I invoke the protocol of genetic security. Any threat to the purity of the Valtharian bloodline must be eliminated. Guards take the queen into custody pending medical intervention. Zarvana's hand moved to the ceremonial blade at her waist, mostly symbolic but still quite lethal. Any guard who approaches will learn exactly how I earned this throne 300 years ago. The guards hesitated. Zarvana was not just their queen, she was a living legend. Stories of her battlefield prowess had become mythology. Even armed and numerous, they feared her. Into the standoff, a new voice spoke. Princess Elixra stepped forward from her position in the outer circle, moving to stand beside her sister. War Marshal Kydros invokes protocol designed to protect our species from external genetic threats. But he misapplies it here. The queen is not threatened, she has conceived. By any measure of our law, a royal pregnancy is cause for celebration, not imprisonment. A royal pregnancy with pure Valtharian genetics, Kydros countered. Not this hybrid mockery. Show me in the law where it specifies the father's species. Elixra's challenge hung in the air. I have studied every legal text in our archives. The succession law requires only that the queen produce an heir before age 300. It says nothing about genetic purity of the father. Murmurs rippled through the council. Elixra had found the loophole. Ancient laws written before the Valtharians had even encountered other species couldn't account for interspecies reproduction because no one had imagined it possible. Kydros's face flushed darker orange. The intent is clear. Intent is not law, War Marshal. The law is the law. A new voice joined the debate. Councillor Rethak, the elderly keeper of traditions, stepped forward. To everyone's surprise, he moved to Elixra's side. Princess Elixra is correct. The succession law requires an heir, nothing more. If Her Majesty has conceived, then the law is satisfied. You cannot seriously support this madness. Kydros appealed to the full council. A hybrid on the throne, it will destroy everything we've built. Or it will save us. Rethak's aged voice carried unexpected strength. I have watched our birth rates decline for 2 centuries. Watched genetic diseases increase despite our vaunted purity. Watched us become so specialized that we're breeding ourselves into extinction. Perhaps Her Majesty's child is not a threat. Perhaps it is the answer we were too proud to seek. The chamber divided before Zarvana's eyes. Council members began moving, literally choosing sides as they shifted positions. Some clustered around Kydros, faces set in rigid determination to preserve tradition. Others moved toward Elixra and Rethak, their expressions mixing uncertainty with curiosity. When the movement stopped, the split was nearly even. 28 councillors stood with Kydros. 22 had chosen Zarvana's side. It seems we have reached an impasse, Your Majesty. Kydros's smile held no warmth. The council is divided. By law, divided councils must be resolved through formal challenge. I hereby invoke my right as War Marshal to challenge for the throne on grounds of genetic corruption. You want a civil war over this child? I want to preserve our species from contamination. If that requires war, so be it. He turned to his supporters, those loyal to true Valtharian values to me. We reconvene at the military complex. The rest of you choose carefully where your loyalties lie. Kydros strode from the chamber, 28 councillors following. The massive doors sealed behind them with terminal finality. Zarvana stood in the center of what remained of her council, watching her empire crack down the middle. Elixra moved to her side, placing a hand on her sister's arm. This is bad. This is war. Zarvana looked at the 22 councillors who had stayed then at Theron, still standing under guard. Release him. If we're fighting for the right to have this child, he should be part of the decisions. As the guard stepped back, Theron approached cautiously. The remaining councillors watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely disguised disgust. He stopped a respectful distance from Zarvana, that every eye in the chamber judged their interaction. Your Majesty, I never meant to cause a civil war. You didn't cause anything, Captain. You were just the catalyst for conflicts that have been building for centuries. She addressed the remaining council. Kydros commands the military. He has resources, training, and fanatical loyalty from the genetic purists. What do we have? Councillor Rethak stepped forward. We have the law on our side. We have the historical archives. We have the moral high ground. Moral high ground doesn't win wars against orbital weapons platforms. Zarvana moved to the chamber's strategic display, pulling up military assets. The numbers were grim. Kydros controlled 60% of the fleet, 70% of ground forces, and all of the military production facilities. We need allies. We need time. And most importantly, we need to survive long enough for this child to be born. Why back? One of the younger counselors spoke up. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but if Kydros wants to prevent the hybrid birth, why not simply wait until after and then challenge the child's legitimacy? Why start a war now? Theron cleared his throat. Because he doesn't want to destroy the child. He wants to control it. All eyes turned to him. He continued choosing words carefully. Think about it. A hybrid with the strength of Valtharian genetics and the adaptability of human DNA. If he defeats the Queen, takes control, he can claim the child as a military asset, raise it loyal to his vision, use it as proof that he's strong enough to control even genetic abominations. Silence greeted this assessment. Then Elixra nodded slowly. He's right. Kydros isn't a fanatic. He's an opportunist. He sees the hybrid as a weapon, not a threat. Then we make sure he never gets the chance to use it as one. Zarvana straightened her tactical mind, engaging fully. Elixra, I need you to coordinate with the Loyalist fleet commanders. Anyone who supports the legal succession stays with us. Rethak accessed the ancient texts. If there are any precedents for hybrid rulers, any historical examples of genetic mixing, I want them found and publicized. And me? Theron asked. Zarvana looked at him, this impossible human who had upended her entire world. You're going to help train our forces. Human military tactics are different from ours. We need every advantage. Your Majesty, I'm a scout, not a general. You're the father of my child. That makes you whatever we need you to be. Day 6 saw Zarvana move the Loyalist government to the secondary palace in the Northern Territories, a fortress designed to withstand sieges. Fleet elements began positioning themselves, choosing sides in what everyone knew would become the first Valtharian civil war in 3,000 years. Day 7 brought the first skirmish, a brief exchange between opposing fleets over a strategic supply depot. No casualties, but the message was clear: this conflict would escalate. True to his word, Theron proved valuable despite his protests of being merely a scout. His understanding of guerrilla warfare and unconventional tactics gave the smaller Loyalist forces options they hadn't considered. He spent hours with Valtharian commanders explaining human concepts of asymmetric engagement, showing them how to turn their numerical disadvantage into tactical flexibility. But he remained acutely aware that this was not his fight to lead. He was supporting Zarvana, not replacing her. On day 8, as Zarvana reviewed defense perimeters from her command center, alarms shrieked through the fortress. Elixra burst into the room, her face pale. Sister, the medical monitors. The pregnancy, it's accelerating faster than predicted. Zarvana's hand went to her abdomen, where a slight curve had finally begun to show. How much faster? Original projections said 12 days total. We're on day 8, but the growth rate just tripled. The doctors estimate, Elixra swallowed hard, 72 hours, maybe less. 3 days. The words felt like a death sentence. Kydros will never let me survive labor. He'll attack the moment he knows I'm vulnerable. Then we don't tell him. Theron had entered quietly, but his voice carried certainty. We keep the acceleration secret. Let him think he has time. He has spies everywhere. The moment I go into labor, he'll know. Then we give him something more important to worry about. Elixra pulled up tactical displays. Most of Kydros's fleet is concentrated around the capital. If we launched a diversionary attack on his supply lines, we'd lose ships we can't afford to lose. Zarvana studied the displays, feeling the weight of impossible choices. Every vessel we have is critical to our defense. A new sensation rippled through her abdomen, not pain but pressure. Energy. The child moving, growing its hybrid nature, already affecting her in ways no purely Valtharian pregnancy ever had. She gasped, gripping the edge of the console. Theron was at her side instantly. What's wrong? The child, I can feel it. Not just physically, it's like it's connected to everything around me. The computers, the defense systems, even the lights. As if to prove her point, the room's illumination flickered in rhythm with her elevated heartbeat. Elixra ran a handheld medical scanner. Your bioelectric field is spiking. The hybrid genetics are amplifying your natural electromagnetic signature. Sister, if this continues, you might be able to interface directly with our technology. Or I might accidentally shut down our defense grid during a contraction. Zarvana forced herself to breathe steadily, calming the energy surge. This is getting dangerous. Then we need to move up our timeline. Rethak entered the command center, ancient data tablets in hand. I found something in the old texts, the prophecy of the Catalyst Queen. He displayed the text, thousands of years old, written in archaic Valtharian script. Elixir read it aloud, translating for Theron's benefit. When purity becomes prison, when strength breeds weakness, when the crown weighs heavier than the world it rules, then shall come the Catalyst Queen. She who births new evolution shall lose her throne, but gain eternity. Through her sacrifice, the rigid become flexible. Through her courage, the pure become whole. The bridge she builds will span not systems, but species, and her legacy shall echo longer than empires. Silence filled the command center. Zarvana felt the words settle into her bones like a prophecy she'd always known, but never acknowledged. Lose her throne, but gain eternity. She repeated the phrase slowly. The child cannot inherit a pure Valtharian throne. The law won't allow it. But a new kind of throne might. Theron's voice held carefully controlled hope. What if that's the answer, not fighting to preserve the old empire, but building something new? You're suggesting I abdicate. I'm suggesting you evolve. He moved closer, mindful of the watching counselors. This child represents a future neither of our species could build alone. Maybe the prophecy isn't about losing your throne. Maybe it's about transcending it. Elixir nodded slowly. If you abdicate before the birth, you remove Kidros's primary motivation. He's fighting to prevent a hybrid from inheriting the throne. If there's no throne to inherit, if you step down willingly, he loses his justification for war. Zarvana turned the idea over, examining it from every angle. I offer to abdicate peacefully. Elixir takes the crown. The hybrid child is raised as a private citizen, not an heir. Kidros gets what he claims to want: genetic purity preserved on the throne. And you get to keep your child alive. Rethak's ancient eyes held understanding. Sometimes wisdom is knowing when to surrender the battle to win the war. Zarvana looked at each of them, her sister, her unexpected ally, and Rethak, the human who had become so much more than a crash pilot. 3 days until birth. 3 days to end a civil war before it truly began. Draft the formal abdication. I'll present it to Kydros personally. Day 9. That night, Zarvana stood on the fortress balcony watching distant lights from orbital platforms where fleets maneuvered in preparation for potential combat. Theron found her there, wrapped in thermal cloak against the northern cold. Having second thoughts. Constantly. She didn't look at him, keeping her eyes on the stars. 300 years I've worn that crown. Built this empire from the ashes of civil war, forged alliances, conquered enemies, brought prosperity to billions. And I'm going to give it all up for a child that hasn't even been born yet. You're giving it up so the child can be born. That's different, Ed, is it? Now she turned to face him. What kind of life will this child have? Neither fully Valtharian nor human. Unable to inherit, unable to fully belong to either species. We're bringing a being into existence that will forever be caught between worlds. Theron moved closer, his smaller frame somehow grounding in its solidity. My wife Sarah used to say that hybrid plants were the strongest because they had to develop their own identity. They couldn't rely on pure genetic memory. They had to adapt, improvise, become something neither parent species could predict. He placed a hand gently on her abdomen, feeling the energy pulse beneath. This child will forge its own path. Maybe that's not a curse. Maybe that's freedom. You sound very certain for someone whose entire world has been upended by an impossible pregnancy. I sound like someone who's already lost one chance at family. I'm not losing this one. His eyes met hers and she saw the depth of determination there. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever Kidros decides, we protect this child. Everything else is negotiable. Even if protecting it means losing everything. Everything except each other. She kissed him, and there on the balcony under alien stars, two beings from different worlds united by the impossibility growing between them. When they finally separated, she rested her forehead against his, an awkward angle given their height difference, but somehow perfect. Day 9 morning arrived cold and clear. Zarvana transmitted her formal request for parley to Kidros. The response came within the hour. He would meet her alone in the ancient throne room of the original palace. Neutral ground, though both knew neutrality was a polite fiction when one party commanded the military complex next door. Elixir protested the meeting. It's a trap. He'll kill you the moment you're in range. Possibly. But he's also a traditionalist. The throne room is sacred ground. To violate parley, there would turn even his supporters against him. Zarvana donned her formal regalia one last time, the weight of the crown suddenly feeling more metaphorical than physical. If I die, you become queen. The child becomes your responsibility. Don't talk like that. I'm being practical. She embraced her sister, holding her close. If Kydros refuses the abdication, if he demands the child's death as the price of peace, Then we fight. No, then you protect this child with everything you have. Promise me, Elixra. Whatever happens in that throne room, whatever I agree to, you keep this child safe. Tears crystallized in Elixra's eyes. I promise. The throne room stood empty except for two figures. Zarvana entered from the north, Kydros from the south. They met in the center beneath vaulted ceilings that had witnessed every coronation and abdication in Valtharian history. Kydros looked older than she remembered, as if the stress of impending war had aged him decades and days. His scarred face held no triumph, now only weariness. Your Majesty, you requested this meeting. I assume you've come to your senses. I have come to offer peace. Zarvana pulled the formal abdication document from her robes, its ancient parchment carrying the weight of tradition. I will step down from the throne immediately. Elixra will be crowned queen within the week. The hybrid child will be born as a private citizen with no claim to succession. In exchange, you stand down your forces and allow me to live in peace with my family. Kydros took the document, reading it carefully. His expression gave nothing away. When he finally looked up, his eyes held something she hadn't expected: regret. This is a generous offer, Your Majesty. Generous and wise. Under other circumstances, I would accept gladly. He set the document down on the empty throne. But circumstances have moved beyond my control. What do you mean, the genetic purists? The faction that sees any compromise with hybrid existence as species suicide is Durisham. They number in the millions, now spread across every colony world. If I accept this abdication, if I allow the hybrid to live, they will see it as betrayal. They will remove me and continue the war without me. Then control your followers, War Marshal. I created a monster, Your Majesty. I thought I could use their fanaticism to pressure you into marriage. Instead, I radicalized them into something I can no longer command. His voice dropped. They demand the hybrid's death. Nothing less will satisfy them. And if I don't deliver it, they will kill me and continue hunting you anyway. Zarvana felt the child move inside her, responding to her elevated stress. You're saying peace is impossible. I'm saying you've forced me into a position where I must choose between my own survival and my conscience. Kydros moved to the window, looking out over the city. I have spent my life serving this empire, fighting its wars, building its military might. I believed in genetic purity because it was the foundation of everything we were. And now I see a pregnant queen willing to sacrifice everything for a child that shouldn't exist. I see that child already affecting your physiology in ways that make you stronger, not weaker. I see the possibility that perhaps we have been wrong for 10,000 years. He turned back to face her. But I also see millions of fanatics who will burn entire worlds rather than accept that possibility. So what happens now? Now I reject your abdication. His voice hardened with military authority. And I give you 72 hours to leave Valtharian space entirely. Take your human, take your hybrid, but leave this empire and never return. Exile. Survival. For you and the child. It's the best I can offer against forces I no longer control. Zarvana studied his face, seeing the truth there. Kydros was not the villain she'd painted him as. He was a man caught between the traditions he'd been raised to defend and the future he could see dawning. His offer was mercy disguised as defeat. And if I refuse exile, then the fanatics will hunt you through every system in the galaxy. They will never stop, never surrender, and they will eventually kill you and the child. He moved closer, voice dropping to near whisper. Please, Your Majesty, I have done terrible things in service to a cause I now question. Let me do one good thing. Let me give you the chance to live. Before she could respond, alarms shrieked through the throne room. Both turned toward the sound as emergency broadcasts filled every display. Fanatic fleet elements have broken from main formation. They're targeting the northern fortress. Multiple nuclear weapons detected. Impact in 90 seconds. Kydros' face went pale. No, I gave no such order. They're no longer following your orders, War Marshal. Zarvana was already running for the exit. They're following their hatred. She burst from the throne room into chaos. Transports scrambled for evacuation. Security forces moved to defensive positions. And somewhere in the northern fortress, Elixra and Terran waited with the rest of her loyalists, unaware they had 90 seconds to live. Zarvana's mind raced through impossible calculations. The fortress was too far for any conventional transport. Communications were jammed. There was no way to warn them, no way to evacuate, no way to... The child moved inside her, and with it came a surge of energy that lit up every electronic system within 100 meters. The sensation she'd felt before the connection to technology suddenly amplified beyond anything she'd experienced. She could feel the fortress's defense grid, feel the incoming missiles, feel the electromagnetic spectrum itself bending around her consciousness. "Your Majesty, we need to evacuate." A security officer grabbed her arm. "No, I need total silence." Zarvana closed her eyes, letting the hybrid's power flow through her. She could feel Elixir's biosignature in the fortress, could feel Theron's different electromagnetic pattern, could feel hundreds of loyal lives about to be extinguished. 50 seconds. She reached out with her mind, with the child's amplified power touching the defense grid. Ancient Valtharian technology responded to her hybrid consciousness in ways it never had to pure biology. She felt weapon systems activating, felt targeting protocols engaging, felt the fortress itself becoming an extension of her will. 30 seconds. "Everyone get down." She didn't know if she shouted it aloud or broadcast it telepathically through the fortress's communication systems. Didn't matter. The missiles were seconds from impact. She seized control of every defensive weapon, every interceptor, every countermeasure the fortress possessed, fired them simultaneously in a pattern no computer could have calculated, no pure Valtharian consciousness could have coordinated. 10 seconds. The sky above the northern fortress erupted in light. Missiles detonated short of their targets, interceptors finding marks with impossible precision. Nuclear fire bloomed in the upper atmosphere far enough away that the blast waves dissipated harmlessly against mountain stone. Zarvana collapsed to the throne room floor, the effort of controlling so much technology leaving her drained. But alive. They were all alive. Kidros knelt beside her, his expression mixing awe and terror. What was that? That was your proof that hybrid genetics aren't weakness. She struggled to sit up, one hand on her abdomen, where the child still pulsed with residual energy. That was evolution saving lives that purity would have let die. Emergency channels crackled to life. Elixir's voice shaken but alive. "Sister, was that you?" The defense grid just went completely autonomous, targeting with precision. Our best AI couldn't match. "It was me, or rather it was us." Zarvana looked at Kydros. "The child gave me abilities no pure Valtharian possesses. That's what you fear. That's what the fanatics want destroyed. Not because it's weak, but because it makes everything they believe obsolete." Kydros stood slowly, his face transformed by what he'd witnessed. When he spoke, his voice carried no more military authority, only wonder. "The fanatics will never stop hunting you. But perhaps—" He paused, seeming to make a decision that would define the rest of his life. "Perhaps it's time I stopped enabling them." "What are you saying, War Marshal?" "I'm saying exile might work for both of us. You take your hybrid and leave Valtharian space. I stay here and fight the fanatics who would have killed their own queen to preserve an ideal that's already dead." He offered his hand. "We end this war before it truly begins. You get to raise your child in peace. I get to rebuild an empire that can accept evolution instead of fearing it." Zarvana looked at his outstretched hand, seeing the scars from 100 battles fought in service to a cause he no longer believed in. Slowly, she reached out and clasped it. 48 hours. "Make it 48. The fanatics will regroup faster than I'd like." "Where will you go?" "As far from here as possible." She thought of Theron, waiting in the fortress, probably terrified but alive. Thought of the child growing impossibly fast inside her, ready to be born in a universe that feared it. "We'll find somewhere to build a new future." "Good luck, Your Majesty. Or should I say former Majesty?" "Just call me Zarvana." The crown was always heavier than the responsibility it represented. She returned to the fortress to find controlled chaos transformed into confused relief. Elixir met her at the landing platform, pulling her into an embrace that spoke of terror barely survived. "What happened? How did you control the defense grid from the capital?" "The child. Its hybrid nature is giving me abilities I'm only beginning to understand." Zarvana pulled back, meeting her sister's eyes. "And I need you to prepare for something difficult." "I'm abdicating, not as surrender, but as strategy." She explained quickly Kydros' warning, the fanatic threat, the exile offer. Elixir listened, her face cycling through shock, anger, and finally reluctant acceptance. "You're leaving me with the throne in the Civil War. I'm leaving you with the chance to rebuild an empire that can accept change. Kydros will help. He's seen what the hybrid can do. He understands now that evolution isn't the enemy." "And you, where will you go?" "Far enough that the fanatics can't follow. Long enough to raise this child in peace." Zarvana smiled sadly. "Somewhere I can be just Zarvana, not a queen, just a mother. Theron approached cautiously, relief evident in every line of his body. I felt you during the attack, like you were inside my head warning me to take cover. Was that real? The child is creating a bond between us. I can feel you now even when we're apart. Your heartbeat, your fear, your... She paused as another contraction rippled through her, stronger than before. We need to move quickly. The birth is coming sooner than predicted. How soon? Hours, maybe less. She looked between Elixir and Theron. We need a ship, fast, well-armed, capable of long-range jumps, and we need it ready to launch within the hour. Elixir was already moving, issuing orders to her command staff. I have just the thing, the scout ship Wanderer, fastest vessel in the fleet, modified for deep space reconnaissance. I'll have it fueled and provisioned. And then you run, sister. You run fast and far, and you don't look back. Elixir's voice cracked slightly, and when this child is grown, when the galaxy is ready to accept what it represents, you come home. That might take a lifetime. Then take a lifetime. You've got nothing but time now. 30 minutes later, Zarvana stood in the Wanderer's cockpit, Theron running final system checks beside her. Through the viewport, she could see the northern fortress, where she'd made her last stand as queen. Beyond it, the capital where she'd ruled for 3 centuries. Below, a frozen planet that had been home longer than most species civilizations endured. Another contraction hit stronger than the last. The child was running out of patience. We need to jump, now. Coordinates. Theron's hands flew over controls, his pilot training making him natural despite the unfamiliar Valtharian systems. Far, beyond the frontier, somewhere the maps end and legends begin. She felt the child move, felt its strange connection to the ship's systems, felt the future opening before them like a flower blooming in vacuum. Somewhere we can make our own map. The Wanderer's engines engaged with a sound like thunder, captured and compressed. On every screen in the fortress below, Elixir watched her sister's ship accelerate toward the sky, watched it punch through atmosphere in a trail of ionized air, watched it reach orbit and orient toward the outer system, toward the jump point, toward everywhere that wasn't here. Farewell, sister, Elixir whispered. May your impossible child grow strong. The Wanderer jumped, tearing a hole in space-time and disappearing through it. Behind it, the Valtharian Empire began the long, painful process of learning that evolution waited for no one. That change came whether you welcomed it or fought it. That sometimes the greatest queens were the ones who knew when to walk away from crowns that had become cages. And ahead in the infinite dark between stars, Zarvana felt the first true labor contraction and knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Human and Valtharian. Father and mother. 2 beings building a bridge across the galaxy, one impossible moment at a time. The revolution had begun. Not with war, but with surrender. Not with victory, but with exile. Not with a crown, but with a choice. And somewhere in the space between heartbeats, between human and alien, between what was and what might be a child, prepared to enter a universe that wasn't ready for her but would have no choice but to adapt. Just like her mother. Just like her father. Just like evolution itself. The Wanderer tore through the fabric of space, its jump drive screaming physics into submission. Inside the cramped cockpit, Zarvana gripped the navigator's console as another contraction rippled through her body. The child was done waiting. Evolution, it seemed, operated on its own timeline. How long until we clear the outer marker? Her voice remained steady despite the pain. 3 centuries of discipline, refusing to yield even now. Theron's hands danced across controls designed for beings 8 feet tall, his smaller frame forcing awkward reaches. 2 minutes to the jump point. Then we're clear of Valtharian space and confined somewhere to... He stopped as warning alarms shrieked through the ship. Contact. 3 vessels. Fast pursuit vectors. Kidros's forces. Checking signatures. His face went pale reading the data. Worse. Fanatic fleet elements. They must have been waiting at the jump point. The ship shuddered as energy weapons raked across shields. Theron threw the Wanderer into evasive maneuvers, but the pursuing ships were military-grade hunters designed for exactly this scenario. Another hit stronger than the first. Shield integrity dropped 15%. Zarvana forced herself to focus past the contractions, pulling up tactical displays. 3 against 1. The Wanderer was fast but lightly armed, a scout ship, not a warship. In a straight fight, they'd last maybe 5 minutes. Can we outrun them to the jump point? Not before they tear us apart. Another impact punctuated his words. Shields at 60% now. I can try to lose them in the asteroid belt, but I'm going into active labor, and flying evasive maneuvers through an asteroid field is insane. She finished the thought he was too polite to voice. Another contraction hit stronger than the last. The child's energy surged through her, making every display in the cockpit flicker in sympathy. The baby is affecting the ship's systems again. Can you control it? I barely controlled it during the missile defense. Now in labor, she tried anyway, reaching for that strange hybrid connection to technology. Found it instantly stronger than before. The child wasn't just affecting systems anymore, it was integrating with them. She could feel the ship's sensors as extensions of her own awareness, feel the weapons targeting them, feel the quantum foam of the approaching jump point. I have an idea, it's insane, but another hit cut her off. Shields at 40%, hull breaches on the port side. Theron, can you give me manual override on all ship systems? You want to fly while in labor. I want the baby to fly. She saw the incomprehension in his eyes. The hybrid genetics are giving it abilities we don't understand. Interfacing with technology is apparently one of them. If I let go, let the child's consciousness merge with the ship. That's beyond insane, that's suicide. So is getting blown apart by fanatics. She pulled herself from the navigator's seat, moving to the central control column, placed both hands on it, closed her eyes. Get ready to assist with the birth. We're about to get very turbulent. Zarvana, trust me, trust our child. She let go, dropped every barrier between her consciousness and the hybrids. The sensation was like diving into an ocean of pure thought, finding herself no longer separate from the ship, but part of it. She felt the Wanderer's engines, as her own heartbeat felt the pursuing vessels, as threats to her unborn self felt the asteroid belt ahead, not as obstacle, but as opportunity. The ship moved, not with Theron's skilled piloting or Zarvana's tactical precision, but with something else entirely. Something that thought in three-dimensional chess while simultaneously calculating quantum probabilities and predicting enemy movements based on electromagnetic signatures they hadn't consciously registered. The Wanderer dove into the asteroid belt at speeds that should have been fatal. Wove between tumbling rocks with centimeters to spare. Used the larger asteroid's gravity wells to slingshot into impossible vectors. Behind them, the pursuing ships tried to match the maneuvers. Failed. One clipped an asteroid and spun out of control. The other two fell back, unable to match the hybrid-controlled precision. But the effort cost. Zarvana felt the child's consciousness straining, felt her own body protesting the dual demands of labor and technological integration. Blood trickled from her nose. Her vision blurred. The contractions were coming every 30 seconds now, overwhelming everything else. Can't hold it much longer. The words came thick, distorted. Zarvana. Theron was beside her, supporting her weight. Let go, the baby can't sustain this. Neither can you. Almost to jump point, you're killing yourself, both of you. The truth of his words penetrated the hybrid haze. She was burning out using the child's abilities beyond safe limits. But they were so close. The jump point was right there, freedom just seconds away. One of the pursuing ships launched a final desperate salvo. Missiles, not energy weapons. Slower but far more destructive. The hybrid consciousness registered them, calculated intercept vectors, found them mathematically impossible to evade while maintaining jump trajectory. In that frozen moment of decision, Zarvana felt the child make a choice. The Wanderer stopped dead, simply ceased all forward momentum in a way that violated every law of inertia and momentum. The missiles, unable to course correct, screamed past them harmlessly. The pursuing ships, expecting continued evasion, overshot their target by thousands of kilometers. And in that brief window of confusion, the Wanderer jumped. The sensation of faster-than-light travel tore Zarvana's consciousness away from the ship's systems. She collapsed into Theron's arms, the hybrid connection severing like a cut cable. Her body, suddenly aware it was only her body again, went into full labor. Medical bay, now! Theron was already moving, carrying her despite the awkward height difference. The Wanderer's autopilot had engaged, taking them on a random trajectory away from Valtharian space, away from pursuit, away from everything except each other and the child determined to be born. The medical bay was small, designed for single-occupant emergency care. Theron laid her on the examination table, his hands shaking as he pulled up medical protocols on the holographic display. I delivered a calf once, in Texas, on my uncle's ranch. His voice carried the manic energy of someone facing impossible circumstances. Completely different biology, but the principle, Theron. She gripped his hand hard enough to make him wince. You're babbling. I'm terrified. Good, so am I. Another contraction, the strongest yet. But we're doing this together, you and me. just like everything else. The birth was unlike anything in Valtharian medical texts or human obstetric knowledge. The hybrid genetics created their own rules. Contractions that should have lasted hours compressed into minutes. Pain that should have been unbearable became strangely manageable as if the child itself was regulating its mother's neurochemistry. Energy pulses that made the medical equipment alternate between hyperfunction and complete shutdown. Through it all, Theron stayed beside her, held her hand, followed her instructions when she was coherent enough to give them, improvised when she wasn't. His face cycled through terror and wonder and fierce determination to see this through despite having no idea what he was doing. "I can see the head," his voice cracked. "Oh God, I can see." "Then catch her." Zarvana's voice was all queen and all mother simultaneously. "Don't you dare drop my daughter, Captain Vex." One final push. One final surge of hybrid energy that lit up every system on the ship like a star being born. And then crying. Not the thin mewling of a newborn, but a full-throated declaration of existence that resonated through the electromagnetic spectrum itself. Theron held a child covered in birth fluids, her skin shifting between orange and peach tones like sunset in flux. Her eyes, when they opened, were neither pure gold nor pure brown, but something that contained both colors and others no language had names for. Her cry made the medical bay's lights pulse in rhythm, made the ship's computer core stutter, in sympathetic response, made reality itself seem to take notice that something new had entered the universe. "She's beautiful." Theron's voice held every ounce of wonder in the galaxy. "She's absolutely perfect." He placed the child on Zarvana's chest. The moment they touched, the energy pulses stopped. The lights stabilized. The crying softened to curious sounds as mother and daughter regarded each other for the first time. "Nethera," Zarvana spoke the name she'd chosen days ago. "Welcome to a universe that isn't ready for you." The baby Nethera reached up with impossibly coordinated hands and touched her mother's face. Where she touched, Zarvana felt not just physical contact, but emotional resonance. Love, curiosity, the overwhelming sense of connection that transcended species and genetics and everything that should have made this impossible. She's not just interfacing with technology. Zarvana looked up at Theron with tears streaming down her face. "She's empathic. I can feel her feelings." "Can you?" Theron leaned down, letting Nethera's tiny hand grasp his finger. His expression transformed as the connection formed. Oh, wow, she's happy. She knows us, knows we're her parents, knows she's safe. She's only been alive for 5 minutes, and she's already changing the rules." Zarvana pulled them both close, this impossible family, floating in a ship between stars. "What have we created?" Before either could answer, proximity alarms began their urgent song. Another ship had dropped out of hyperspace nearby, large, military-grade, moving on intercept vector. "No," Theron moved to the medical bay's display, pulling up sensor data. "They couldn't have followed us. We jumped random coordinates. There's no way." Incoming transmission. The ship's computer announced in neutral tones. A holographic figure materialized in the medical bay. War Marshal Kydros, his scarred face showing none of the triumph or hatred they'd expected. "Only urgency. Don't fire. I'm alone. No fleet elements, no backup. Just me and a command shuttle." His eyes found Zarvana, then the child in her arms. "Your Majesty, I need you to listen very carefully. The fanatics didn't just pursue you. They're planning something catastrophic." "How did you find us?" Zarvana demanded. "The energy signature from the birth. It registered across half the sector. Every ship with sensitive enough sensors felt it, including the fanatic fleet gathering at the frontier." He leaned closer to his display. "They're preparing to jump after you. Not 3 ships this time, 30. They're going to hunt you across the galaxy if necessary. Then we keep running. There's no running far enough. Not from this level of fanaticism." Kydros paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "But there might be another way. Let me aboard. Let me see this child that's caused so much chaos. Let me understand what I've been fighting against." Theron moved between Kydros' hologram and Zarvana. "This is a trap. Has to be." "It's not. I swear on every battle I've won, every war I've fought, every scar I carry, I'm not here to harm you." Kydros' voice carried no military authority now, only human desperation. "I'm here because I watched you save hundreds of lives using abilities no pure Valtharian possesses. Because I've spent my life serving an ideal that's choking us to death. Because I need to know if what I felt watching you was real or just hope poisoning my judgment." Zarvana studied his face through the hologram, searching for deception. found only exhaustion and something that looked remarkably like grief. You have 5 minutes, weapons powered down. Any hostile move and my daughter demonstrates what hybrid genetics can really do. Understood. Kidros' shuttle docked with the Wanderer 10 minutes later. He came aboard alone as promised, his massive frame somehow diminished by the weight of everything he carried. He stopped at the medical bay entrance, staring at Zarvanathram and the child in her arms. May I? He gestured toward them, slowly. Theron had retrieved a plasma pistol from somewhere, keeping it trained on the war marshal. And keep your hands visible. Kidros approached like a man walking toward either salvation or execution, unsure which. He knelt beside the examination table, bringing his scarred face level with the newborn. Nithera regarded him with those impossible eyes seeming to look through him rather than at him. She's so small. His voice cracked. I've been preparing to go to war over something that weighs less than my armor. She's 3 hours old and she already flew a starship through an asteroid belt while being born. Zarvana's tone held protective steel. Size is relative. I meant no offense. He trailed off as Nithera reached toward him, her tiny hand extended. Should I? That's her choice, not mine. Kidros let the child's fingers wrap around one of his much larger ones. The moment contact formed, his entire body went rigid. His eyes widened. A sound escaped him that might have been a comb or a laugh, or something between. I can feel her. Tears cut through his scars. She's showing me everything. What she feels, what you feel, the love between you and Captain Vex, the hope, the fear, the absolute certainty that she deserves to exist despite every tradition saying otherwise. He looked up at Zarvana, his face transformed. I've spent 50 years enforcing genetic purity, building walls between species, treating difference as threat. And this child, in 5 seconds, she's shown me how much we've lost in the name of protecting what we are. Then help us. Zarvana shifted Nithera slightly, keeping the connection between her daughter and the war marshal. You say 30 ships are coming. You have resources, knowledge of their tactics. Help us survive long enough to reach somewhere safe. I'll do better than that. Kidros gently released Nithera's hand, standing to his full height. I'll lead them away. Make them think I'm chasing you in a different direction. Buy you time to disappear completely. They'll kill you when they discover the deception. Probably, but I've lived long enough, fought enough battles for the wrong reasons. Let my last fight be for something that actually matters. He moved toward the exit, then paused. What will you do? Where will you go? Far enough that myths are born instead of hunted. Zarvana looked at Theron, then at Nithera. We'll find somewhere to raise her in peace. Let her grow strong. And when she's ready, when the galaxy is ready, we'll introduce them to each other and see what happens. She'll change everything you know, that child. She's proof that hybrid genetics work. Proof that purity is a cage we built ourselves. Other species will see what you've created and want it for themselves. Good. Evolution shouldn't be a solo performance. Kidros nodded once sharply, the gesture of a soldier acknowledging orders he knows will be his last. Your Majesty, it has been an honor serving you, even when I served poorly. War Marshal. She stopped him at the doorway. Thank you for choosing courage over comfort, for letting a newborn child teach you what 50 years of battle couldn't. She's a good teacher. He smiled, the expression strange on his war-scarred face. Raise her well, Your Majesty, and when she's grown, tell her that an old warrior once held her hand and saw the future. Tell her it was beautiful. He left. The shuttle detached. On the Wanderer's sensors, they watched him jump away on a vector that would take him directly into the pursuing Fanatic fleet. Watched him broadcast false coordinates, suggesting Zarvana had fled toward the galactic core. Watched 30 warships alter course to follow him, leaving the actual trajectory clear. He's going to die buying us time we didn't ask for. Theron's voice held complicated grief. He's choosing redemption. That's all any of us can do in the end. Choose better than we did before. Zarvana stroked Nithera's head, feeling the child already changing, already growing. Set course for the frontier colonies. The independent systems where rules or suggestions and questions are discouraged. Running forever. Building something new, one day at a time. 8 months passed in a blur of construction and discovery. On a planet so remote it didn't have a name on any official star charts, Zarvana stood at the window of what could generously be called a schoolhouse. Outside, 6 children played in the red dust, 3 human, 2 Valtharian, and 1 impossible hybrid, who led them all in games that mixed the rules of 3 different cultures. Nithera was 6 years old by human standards, though only 8 months had passed since her birth. The accelerated aging had stabilized around a 5-to-1 ratio. She would live a human lifespan, not a Valtharian one, but would experience it at a slightly compressed rate, fast enough to grow and learn quickly, slow enough to have a childhood. She was currently explaining to a confused human boy why floating was perfectly normal if you just asked the local gravity field nicely. The boy's skepticism lasted until Nithera demonstrated rising 3 feet off the ground with casual ease. "She's getting stronger," Elixir's voice came from behind. The princess, now queen, had arrived that morning on her first visit since Zarvana's exile. The empathic abilities, the technology interface, now gravitational manipulation. She learned something new every week. Last month, she talked to a star, had a full conversation with stellar radiation patterns. Zarvana shook her head in wonder. "I created something I don't fully understand." "You created hope." Elixir moved to stand beside her sister. "Back home, news of the hybrid has spread despite Kydros' sacrifice. Other species are reaching out, asking if crossbreeding is possible with them too. 3 Valtharian human couples have been successful so far, all showing the same accelerated development, the same hybrid abilities. How is the council handling that?" "Poorly, but they can't deny the evidence. Each hybrid child is demonstrably superior to either parent species alone. Stronger, faster, more adaptable. The genetic purists are losing ground every day." Elixir paused. "You were right, sister. And Kydros? He died 3 months ago, led the fanatic fleet on a chase through the stellar graveyard. When they finally cornered him, he broadcast everything, his meeting with Nithera, what he felt, what he learned. 30 ships heard a dying warrior tell them they were fighting for ashes while the future burned bright elsewhere. Did it change anything? 12 ships surrendered, 18 continued the hunt for a week before scattering. The fanatic movement isn't dead, but it's dying. Every day that passes with hybrid children thriving is another nail in its coffin." Elixir's hand found Zarvana's. "You could come home. The throne is yours if you want it." Zarvana watched Nithera teaching the human boy to float, watched Terran supervising from a respectful distance, watched the other children's faces light up with wonder. This ramshackle collection of prefab buildings and desperate hope, it wasn't an empire, but it was theirs. "I am home," she smiled at her sister. "For 300 years I wore a crown that weighed like a pemmiito. She gestured at the chaotic playground. "This is freedom, this is purpose, this is what I gave up an empire to build. No regrets. Not one." Theron appeared in the doorway carrying a data pad and wearing an expression mixing amusement and exasperation. "Your daughter just convinced the Greenwich ambassador's son that his 3 hearts mean he can fly 3 times higher than normal children. We now have a diplomatic incident involving a 12-year-old who jumped off a building. Is he alive?" Nithera caught him telekinetically, but barely. "We need to set some ground rules about testing hypotheses on visiting dignitaries' children. She's curious, like her father." Zarvana pulled him close, this human who'd crashed into her life and given her everything she didn't know she needed. "Besides, he did fly. The hypothesis was sound. You're not helping. I'm a former queen. Helping is someone else's job now." Evening found them together in their small home, modest by any imperial standard, but comfortable by frontier measures. Nithera was finally asleep after a day of terrorizing playmates and discovering new abilities. Zarvana and Theron sat on their porch watching the system's 3 moons rise in sequence. "Do you miss it?" Theron asked. "The empire, the power, the sense that you controlled something vast and important." "Every day." She leaned against him, their height difference making the position awkward but familiar. "I spent 300 years building something larger than myself. Left it all behind for something smaller, but infinitely more personal. Some mornings I wake up wondering if I made the right choice. And then Nithera asked me to explain quantum mechanics or demonstrates how to make a flower grow faster by talking to its DNA. And I remember I didn't trade an empire for a child. I traded stagnation for evolution. Comfort for growth. Absolute certainty for beautiful chaos. Poetic for someone who used to solve problems with orbital bombardment. I've been spending time with humans. You people have a way with language when you're not busy being absurdly resilient." She kissed the top of his head. "Thank you, by the way." "For what?" "For crashing on my planet. For being stubborn enough to survive. For showing me that impossible things are just things we haven't tried yet." Her hand found his. "For giving me a family when I thought I was destined to die alone wearing a crown I couldn't take off." Best navigation failure of my life. They sat in comfortable silence watching the moons paint the landscape in silver and bronze. Inside, Nethera dreamed of stirs and sang to them in frequencies only she could produce. Around them, the frontier settlement hummed with the quiet sounds of beings from a dozen species learning to coexist. And above the galaxy turned on its ancient axis, unaware that everything had changed in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Elixir says more hybrids are being born. Theron spoke quietly. Not just Valtharian human, other combinations, other possibilities. The convergence. Zarvana had heard the reports, felt them actually each new hybrid birth registered in Nethera's empathic awareness like a distant chime. 12 confirmed births across 12 different species pairings, all within the last 6 months, all showing unprecedented abilities. You think it means something that Nethera was the catalyst for something larger. I think the universe has a sense of humor and possibly a plan. Whether we're part of the joke or the punchline remains to be seen. She stood, offering him her hand. Come to bed. Tomorrow the Diluvian ambassador arrives with his twin daughters. Nithera wants to teach them hydrokinesis. She can't manipulate water. She couldn't yesterday. Today she demonstrated by making the fountain spell her name. Tomorrow is anyone's guess. Inside, they found Nethera not asleep after all, but sitting cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by holographic star charts she'd somehow generated from pure thought. Her impossible eyes tracked orbital mechanics across three-dimensional space. There are others like me. She spoke without looking up. I can feel them. Across the galaxy. 12 of us now. Soon to be more. Does it frighten you? Zarvana sat beside her daughter. Being one of 12 instead of one of one. No, it makes me feel less alone. Nethera's hand reached out, touched a particular star system on her mental map. This one, they need help. The parents are scared. The other species doesn't understand yet. What do you want to do? What you did for me. Show them it's possible. Show them the impossible things are just things we haven't tried yet. She looked up at her mother with eyes that held wisdom beyond her 8 months. Will you help me help them? Zarvana looked at Theron, saw the same answer in his eyes that she felt in her heart. They'd run far enough, hidden long enough, built something small and beautiful and safe. Now it was time to make it bigger. Yes, we'll help them. All of them. Every hybrid that's born, every family that's frightened, every species that doesn't understand yet. She pulled Nethera close. We'll build bridges between worlds until the whole galaxy realizes that evolution isn't something to fear. It's something to celebrate. Like a school. Nethera's face lit up. A place where all the hybrid children can come learn. Bigger than a school, an academy, a sanctuary, a proof of concept that the future doesn't care about our genetic purity standards. Theron was already pulling up architectural plans on his datapad. We'll need more buildings, more teachers, more resources, more everything. Zarvana smiled. Good thing I know a queen who owes me several favors. 4 months passed in a whirlwind of construction and arrivals. The academy took shape, funded through Elixir's diplomatic channels and supported by species both curious and cautious. Parents brought hybrid children desperate for answers. Teachers volunteered from a dozen different worlds. And every day Nethera grew stronger, pushing boundaries that didn't exist for either parent species alone. 1 year after Nethera's birth, on the anniversary, the local settlers had started calling. Convergence Day, Zarvana stood before an assembly of 30 hybrid children and their parents. The ramshackle settlement had grown into something approaching a small city. Buildings and architectural styles from 20 different species. Gardens growing plants that shouldn't thrive together but did. Children playing games that mixed rules from cultures separated by thousands of light years. I was supposed to die a barren queen, Zarvana's voice carried across the assembled crowd. 300 years wearing a crown that got heavier every day. 20 years of failure trying to produce an heir the traditional way. Then a human pilot crashed on my planet, and everything I thought I knew turned out to be wrong. She gestured to Nethera standing beside Theron in the front row. My daughter is 1 year old today. By traditional Valtharian standards, she shouldn't exist. By human standards, she's an impossibility. By the standards of a galaxy that spent 10,000 years building walls between species, she's an abomination. Silence held the crowd. Zarvana smiled. And yet here she stands, healthy, happy, growing stronger every day. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across 30 young faces that represented 30 different combinations of species. You are not mistakes. You are not accidents. You are the future that was patient enough to wait for us to catch up. The assembly erupted in applause, human clapping, mixing with Valtharian harmonic resonance, and a dozen other cultural expressions of approval. Nethera beamed her empathic abilities, broadcasting joy so strongly that even non-empaths felt the wave of happiness wash over them. 3 days after the anniversary celebration, Zarvana stood aboard a neutral station at the galactic frontier before representatives from 47 different species. She wore no crown, carried no scepter, claimed no title beyond founder of the Hybrid Academy. But when she spoke, the galaxy listened. For 10,000 years, we've built walls between species. Genetic purity laws, cultural separation protocols, rigid definitions of what each species can and cannot do. Her voice carried the authority of 3 centuries on a throne and 1 year building bridges. Those walls are crumbling, not because anyone tore them down, because hybrid children are walking through them like they don't exist. She activated a holographic display. 30 faces appeared, human Valtharian combinations, Greenwich-Talaxian pairings, species mixing that every expert had sworn was impossible. These children represent 30 different genetic combinations, all viable, all healthy, all demonstrating abilities that neither parent species possesses independently. With respect, Founder Zarvana, a Talaxian ambassador, spoke carefully. These hybrids may be healthy, but they also represent unpredictable variables, abilities we can't control, genetics we don't understand. Some might argue they pose a security risk. Some argued the same about fire, about electricity, about quantum computing. Zarvana's smile held edges. Every advancement looks like a threat until it becomes indispensable. We're simply ahead of the curve. The human ambassador stood an elderly woman who'd spent her career building alliances between species. The question isn't whether hybrids exist, they clearly do. The question is how we integrate them into existing legal frameworks designed around species purity. You don't. Theron spoke from his position beside Zarvana, his first words in the formal proceedings. You build new frameworks, you adapt, you evolve. Because the alternative is trying to force the future into boxes designed for the past, and that never works. And who are you to speak here? A Valtharian representative, one of the genetic purist faction, demanded. You're a human pilot who corrupted a queen and started a civil war. I'm a father. Theron's voice held no anger, only certainty. I'm a father who watched his daughter fly a starship with her mind before she was 6 hours old, who watches her teach other hybrid children to do things neither parent species can manage alone, who sees the future you're all debating and knows it's already here, whether you acknowledge it or not. Before anyone could respond, the station's lights flickered. Once, twice. Then every holographic display in the chamber activated simultaneously, showing the same image. Nethera, standing in the Academy's common room with the other 29 hybrid children. All of them had their eyes closed, concentration evident on young faces, and they were broadcasting not through technology, but through pure thought across thousands of light years. We hear you arguing about us, Nethera's voice came through every speaker, debating whether we should exist, whether we're threats or opportunities, whether your laws should acknowledge beings you never planned for. The other children spoke in sequence, their words weaving together like a tapestry. We didn't ask to be born. Our parents made choices. Choices that broke rules, ignored traditions, defied expectations. But we're here now, 30 of us, soon to be more. You can spend decades writing laws to control us. Or you can spend that time learning to grow with us. Because we're not going away. We're not going to hide. We're the future that was patient enough to wait for you. But we're done waiting. Nethera's eyes opened last, those impossible multicolored irises staring through the camera as if she could see every ambassador in the chamber. My mother gave up an empire to build a place where we could exist safely. My father crashed a ship and changed the galaxy. You can either join that change or watch it happen without you. Your choice. The broadcast ended. The ambassadors sat in stunned silence. Then the human ambassador started clapping. Slowly at first, then with building enthusiasm. Well, I think that settles the debate about whether hybrids can communicate effectively. That was a threat, the genetic purist protested. They threatened us. They stated facts. Zarvana's voice cut through the outrage. Hybrid children exist. More will be born. You can work with us to build frameworks that protect them and integrate them, or you can fight a losing battle against evolution itself. Those are your options. The vote, when it finally came hours later, wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. 32 species voted to recognize hybrid children as full citizens with rights and protections under galactic law. 11 abstained, 4 voted against. Progress, Zarvana reflected, was never universal, but it was undeniable. That night, as Zarvana prepared to return to the academy, a new signal appeared on her personal communicator. Not a message, but a data packet. She opened it to find a video. Kidros, recorded before his death. His scarred face looked directly into the camera, speaking to her across time and distance. Your Majesty, if you're watching this, I'm dead. Good. I deserve it for the years I spent enforcing policies I should have questioned. But before I go, I wanted you to know something. He paused, seeming to gather strength. I held your daughter for 5 minutes. 5 minutes of feeling what she felt, seeing what she saw, understanding what hybrid existence really means. Those 5 minutes taught me more than 50 years of war. She showed me that the walls we build to protect ourselves are the same walls that cage us. That purity is just another word for stagnation. That the only unforgivable sin is refusing to evolve when evolution offers itself freely. Another pause. I'm going to die fighting fanatics who believe what I used to believe. Seems appropriate. But I'm dying knowing I was wrong, and that's worth something. Tell your daughter, tell Nathera that an old warrior learned to see clearly at the end. Tell her the future she represents is worth every sacrifice. Tell her to be brave and loud and unapologetic about existing exactly as she is. His expression softened. And tell yourself something too, Zarvana. Tell yourself that giving up the crown was the most powerful thing you ever did. That revolution doesn't always look like war. Sometimes it looks like a mother building a school where impossible children learn to be themselves. That's not failure. That's victory of the highest order. The video ended. Zarvana sat in silence for a long moment, then closed the file. Tomorrow she would return to the academy, would teach hybrid children how to control abilities that defied categorization, would negotiate with species, learning to accept that the future had arrived without permission. But tonight she was simply Zarvana. Not queen, not founder, not revolutionary, just a mother who'd learned to love the punchline. She thought of Nythera dreaming peacefully, of Theron working on expansion plans, of 30 hybrid children growing stronger every day, of Kydros dying with clarity instead of certainty, of Elixra holding a throne that had become collaborative instead of absolute. And she smiled. The universe, it seemed, had excellent timing. Terrible sense of humor, but excellent timing. Somewhere across the galaxy in 12 different systems, 12 more hybrid children were being born. Each one impossible. Each one proof that the rules had changed when no one was looking. Each one a bridge between worlds that had spent millennia maintaining careful distance. The convergence wasn't coming. It had already arrived, and Zarvana, former queen, current mother, eternal rebel, was ready for whatever came next. After all, she'd already done the impossible once. Doing it again was just practice.